This is a reading of the book Muscle and a Shovel, written by Michael Shank. When you turn to page 3, it has the title of the book, and underneath it, it says, "A raw, gritty, true story about finding the truth in a world drowning in religious confusion." The next page has a quote from an unknown author. It says, "It is easier to believe a lie one has heard 1,000 times than to believe a fact one has never heard before." The next page, he dedicates the book to his wife, and he has a special thanks section. And then there's a page titled "A Warning with Love." You possess the most priceless possession known to all of humanity, an eternal soul. It is for this reason that I share my story with you, and I share this story out of genuine love and concern for your eternal future. It is, in my humble opinion, no accident that this book has found its way into your hands. Your existing beliefs are about to be challenged, and your spirit is about to be exercised in ways you may have never considered. I only ask that you remember that it is with Christian love that I share this story with you. The events in this book happened to me many years ago, and it is my hope that these events will serve as a gift to you. You will only obtain blessings, though, if you are able to read this story from beginning to end. However, please let me warn you, this story is going to anger, frustrate, and agitate your mind and spirit beyond description. It is going to challenge your existing beliefs and may turn your world upside down. This is not for the weak-minded, nor is it for those who have their sensibilities easily offended. Some who start this story will not be able to finish it due to the emotional reactions it tends to incite. If you are offended by what you find in the following pages, I ask that you forgive me. My intention is not to offend you, but to share something powerful with you. Will you have the courage, the heart, and the honesty of character to finish this story to the end? I pray that you will have that honest and good heart described by Jesus in Luke 8:15. May our God and Father bless you richly with wisdom and a love for the truth. Chapter 1, Top of the Steps. March 15th, 1988, 12:45 a.m. What are three white faces doing in this part of Nashville at this time of night? That is the way native Nashvillians pronounce the city's name. The Metro Nashville officer stood at my driver's side window shining the beam from a long magnum flashlight in my face. There we were, my wife, my best friend Larry, in the back seat, and me. I had pulled our black Pontiac Grand Am to the side of the road at the corner of Herman Street and 16th. We were only a few hundred yards from Fisk University's campus. Larry had been trying to get us to our location, but we were lost. I was searching for the words as I squinted to see the cop through his light. He was the biggest black man I had ever seen, about 7 feet tall. He could have been a twin to the guy from the movie The Green Mile. I bet he played pro ball. His polished, bald head and fire hydrant-sized arms reminded me of the Mr. Clean Man. We had been profiled. Profiled? Yes. Any good cop worth their salt would have done the same. We were out of place in this neighborhood, and the fact that we were driving so slowly made it appear that we might have been looking to buy drugs. I saw the red and blue lights in my rear view just as we were heading up 16th Avenue North, right across the railroad tracks and a few yards beyond Watkins Park. Nashvillians call this area of town the West Loop. It was an urban neighborhood comprised mostly of African American residents. The West Loop was also home to Fisk University, Tennessee State University, and the beloved Meharry Medical College. Unfortunately, an element of the homeless had disgorged into the West Loop neighborhoods along with the usual accompaniment of drugs. Therefore, 3 white faces meandering slowly through this part of town at 12:45 a.m. was enough to motivate any alert cop to do a traffic check. "You'll never believe me," I told the officer. "Try me," he responded in a deep voice that conveyed the unspoken message. "Let's hear what you've got, little man. I've heard it all before." My heart said, "Be honest, tell him. You've got nothing to lose. Truth has brought you this far, hasn't it? I might as well give it a shot." "We're on our way to get baptized." The giant's eyes widened like someone had mashed his big toe with a drywall hammer. "Tonight? Where?" he asked with a combination of suspicion and guarded excitement. I told him the name of the church building while shamefully admitting that we were lost. Guys just do not admit that they are lost. What the cops said next not only blew my mind, it cemented the possibility of something I had long wondered about. Providence. Not Rhode Island's biggest city, but the providence of God. Providence, in this context, is defined as the foreseen care and guidance of God or a manifestation of divine care. I was never really sold on the concept of divine providence until I heard the giant cop's response. It was then, upon hearing his words, that the principle was solidified in my mind. The officer's entire demeanor changed. He smiled and said, "I'm a member of that church. I actually go to that congregation. God must have wanted me to pull you over because this part of town is not safe this time of night. I'm going to get back in my cruiser, so just follow me and I'll take you to the building." We were speechless. I turned to look at my wife and then to Larry in the back seat. None of us knew what to think or say, but we were beginning to realize that God's fingerprints were on the events that were unfolding that night. I watched the police officer in my driver's side mirror as he literally ran back to his squad car. He ripped around us, leaving the red and blue lights on. Nobody back in El Dorado, Illinois would ever believe this. We followed the police car with his lights flashing, feeling as though we were in some kind of secret parade, following John Coffey's twin brother. We drove past Rio Grande Avenue, then Ireland Street, past Fisk on our left, and then a right on Jackson Street. We continued down a few more blocks and followed him as he pulled into the church building's parking lot. The time was 12:52 a.m. As we turned into the church's parking lot, Larry said, "Would you take a look at that?" My wife, Jonetta, pronounced John-etta, whispered softly, "Who are they?" None of us expected to see the elders and deacons standing out there in front of the building. They were all waiting for us to arrive. They stood shoulder to shoulder on that cold March night, in suits and ties. Those godly men came to the building for the great event. They left the warmth and comfort of their own homes without hesitation, even wearing suits to demonstrate the dignity and importance of the occasion. We knew that someone would be there. I had anticipated 2 or 3 people, but not a crowd this size. The officer stepped from his car and greeted the men. It was evident that they all knew one another well. After a lot of smiles, hugs, and handshakes, a huge cop explained what had happened in the minutes prior to our arrival, pulling us over, thinking we were buying drugs, and then giving us an escort to the church building because of his concern about our safety. The giant cop said his goodbyes, killed the emergency lights, and drove off into the dark of the West Loop night. The men of the church greeted us as long-lost children. They met us like family members returning after a long trip. Each man made a formal introduction of himself and then expressed his personal excitement over our decision to follow the Lord Jesus Christ. They brought us into the building and showed us our respective changing rooms. As we started to change into the baptismal garments, we could hear them singing out in the auditorium. They sang just like they did in the first century. No instruments. They just used their voices, exactly as Ephesians 5:19 and Colossians 3:16 described. We had never heard anything like it before. It was loud, primitive, uninhibited, and even off-key at times, but it was also beautiful and soul-stirring. While changing in the back room, I listened to the men singing and searched for a word to describe their singing without instruments. My mind chased after the right word, but I could not land on it. Stick your tongue out, Mike, the thought went through my mind. The word is on the tip of your tongue. We changed into our baptismal garments, and the men continued to sing and pray. The songs were rich in melody and meaning. Their prayers between songs were beyond description. They sang with such fervor that at one point I thought dozens more had entered the building while we were back in our changing rooms. Don't they know what time it is? Don't they know they'll wake up the entire neighborhood? My spiritually immature mind was not grasping the magnitude of the transformation that was about to take place that night. It was about 1:15 a.m. Jonetta and I stepped to the top of the baptistry. We were barefoot, our hands were locked together, and tears were streaming down our faces. The building resonated with songs and hymns being sung by a group of men who had given their lives to the Master. Jonetta and I stood at the top of the steps. We looked at each other, about to take that step. We only knew one thing for sure: our lives would never be the same. She kissed my cheek, and the word that I had been searching for rushed to the forefront of my mind. It was one word that so accurately described the men singing: pure. How in the world did a young, white, small-town, materialistic, ambitious, partying, not too religious, but membership of a big denomination, married couple, get to the top of these steps? You are about to find out. However, let me give you an honest and fair warning. This is a crazy, raw, crude, true story that will set you on edge and incite your emotions. Just know that in my humble opinion, your willingness and courage to read this story isn't a coincidence. And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28.